And we are live with our third episode of Absolute AppSec After Dark. I'm your host, Seth Law, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter. Ken, say hi.
Hey, lovely. I like the lovely part. Lovely guest or lovely co-host.
Lovely co-host. So we're back to do some more code review. And yeah, at some point we just need to rename this to, instead of After Dark, it'll be AppSec and Whiskey, like the initial idea for the podcast, right? So we just get slowly more and more messed up as we look at code.
If I had whiskey right now, I would fall asleep. I'll be honest with you. I'm I would definitely fall asleep for sure. This coffee is gonna do wonders, I think.
Well, sweet. All right. So first of all, Ken, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is a Rust Rocket framework app. I think Rocket, right? You chose it, so I think that it is. I'm kind of getting my bearings still with it, but yeah, and it is supposed to be something that can work with like Bitwarden, if I'm not mistaken, a client. So web app to work with, yeah, it's like a Bitwarden. So like password management. I don't know if it's a website so much as an API or what yet, but frankly, we obviously don't know much about this. So, but it's a Rocket Rust thing, and we're not familiar with Rust, and certainly not familiar with any of the Rust web frameworks. So why not? Let's just look at something we're completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah, it's called Vault Warden. It's out on GitHub. I just posted the link. Yeah, and honestly, like we haven't done a lot of research into it yet. We haven't explored anything yet. Whether or not we find something, it's probably going to depend. I'm hoping tonight, though, we can at least get through some information gathering, figure out what the app does, how it does it, maybe dig into Rocket a little bit, since I've never seen Rocket before, since it is rocket.rs. It's a web framework for Rust. And yeah, besides that, I don't know how far we're going to go. I do know, so Bitwarden, if anybody, if anyone has experience or does not have experience with Bitwarden, bitwarden.com, it's an open source password manager, right? There's an enterprise edition, but I'm not sure. Yeah, Bitwarden works with almost any device and browser. It's not a password manager, or no, I'm not a. I can't talk, man.
Yeah, I know it's gonna be one of those.
Yeah. Anyway, so bitwarden.com is source code, features, and infrastructure security are vetted and improved by our global community. Trusted security. So I think it's a server that actually acts as a password vault, right?
Okay.
So that's what Bitwarden does. But this version, so Vault Warden is a re-implementation of the Bitwarden protocol using Rust and a different backend. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it just says unofficial Bitwarden compatible server. So they've re-implemented the Bitwarden protocols since they are open source in Rust. Yeah.
Perfect.
So as far as feature goes and parity, I'm really unsure as to what it is. There is a security.md file, so if we find something, we'll disclose. Depending on what it is, yeah. Maybe we won't go completely live with it. I don't know, right? Like I don't know what we'll end up doing, but
there's a security MD way to contact them, so I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. If we find something, we'll push it back across. Again, tonight's episode was more about actually getting to know what Vault Warden does, what the functionality is, what the security features are. We'll talk a little bit about the authorization functions. We'll fill out our notes, right? Like figure out what exactly is going on with Vault Warden. So I mean, we're starting fresh, right? Like this is day one of a secure code review, and we have very little background on this, obviously, right? Like I'm viewing the GitHub pages for these projects right now to figure out exactly what it is we're even dealing with. I think most of the assessments that I do when I'm doing a secure code review for a client, I've got more background than we have on this, Ken. So we're flying pretty blind.
Yeah, we are for sure.
So sweet. So maybe you want me to share out in the notes for a minute, and I'll start filling some of those out. I know Ken's trying to get it up and running using Docker, so we have a running instance to play with at the same time. But what I'm going to do is let's share this out. I'm trying to decide what the best way to do this is. I don't want to share my screen's a little big, so I'm just going to share a window. We'll do Vault Warden. I'm just going to share my notes here really quick, right? And we'll start to tag some of this stuff in, right? As far as the, what it is we're looking at. Yeah, so secure code review, Vault Warden. Code, let's see, code repository is Vault Warden. And commit number that we're looking at.
Oh,
I don't know if I can
point,
even tell. Let's see.
Log says February 27th was the last commit. Do you want me to put it in there, or you got it?
Why don't you drop it in? Because I am commit. No, this is bool. Changes.
Yeah. I gotta blow up this size here.
Oh, that's fine. I can make it bigger if you need me to.
Oh no, it's cool. It's not. I just meant on my screen because I got it. Yeah, I just
findings.
Wait,
nothing.
Did the size?
So I just increased my size.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, mine shouldn't affect you. Yeah, okay, all right. It's like I was like,
I pushed it at the same time.
All right, cool, awesome. I do have it up and running on Docker. Well, Docker says it's running, so I'm trying to figure out what that means and trying to get to it. But yeah, it looks like it is running. So cool. Larry says that it's easier to see now, so that's good.
Oh, good. Cool. Yeah, it was probably a little small when I initially popped it up. So, okay, open source implementation of Bitwarden. Rewritten in Rust. That means we know that it is Rust. At least those are some of the components so far. Who does it for? What kind of information does it hold? Passwords.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
sure, some user data.
Honestly, yeah, user data. Because I think there's more that you can store in Bitwarden, right? If you look at bitwarden.com or the protocol itself, I mean, it's notes and everything else, credit card numbers. Very similar if you've you've used 1Password or anything else in the past. That's interesting though, right? Like I mean, I haven't used Bitwarden before, so I'm interested to see exactly how this actually works.
Me too. Let's see. Yeah. They have I'm trying to, because they've got migrations, so that'll in MySQL. I'm just kind of figuring out right now, like looking at their schema. The users table has like a UUID. That seems to be the main key of how we're tracking them. But anyways, the interesting things in there are just like the So there is a TOTP in it. So there's a TOTP secret and recover. So that'll be of interest. So like we know that there's going to be a TO. I mean, this is a password manager, so I just assume TOTP is going to be involved. But in any case, besides that, in terms of personal information for users, they just keep an email, name. Yeah, everything else is pretty standard stuff. Private key and public key, but again, I assume all that's related to the actual password management aspects. Let's see, they've got a ciphers table. They've got a. Sorry, give me a sec here. I'm trying to. So they've got a. They got users, organizations, collections.
So those are kind of roles, aren't they? So there's
Yeah,
kind of
these
user, and then users can belong to organizations.
Right. Yeah,
Which then
sorry,
have
I'm
access
kind of
to probably different. No. Like they have access into different like key stores, right? So your key could unlock like one organization, but on the server itself, it could host multiple organizations. Interesting. Aspects concern your client, customer, staff the most. I'm asking you this. It's loss of secrets.
Yeah, that would suck.
Any data. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea is that it's protected, right? So
this looks like a pretty. What's that?
No, I was just going to say if somebody can get access to like the master key to unlock, all bets are off, right?
Oh, you know what? The models here are going to be probably very useful for gathering, because I was looking at migration files, but like looking at the models, you can see they have an attachments model, cipher, collection, device, emergency access. And by the way, yeah, just like I think I should back up. We're in the information gathering phase. We're just trying to figure out like what is this going to store in terms of information? How many, like, what are the roles for the application? Things like that. The same stuff you're seeing in the notes. But to do that, we bounce around basically between unit tests, migration files, seed files. Model files can be helpful because model files can point to the actual tables in a database is what I'm trying to say. And so, yeah, it's just for the folks watching, that's sort of this is how we're accomplishing information gathering. We'll also obviously look at any documentation it hosts, like wiki style or whatever. And then of course, like the README is pretty helpful. That's how we saw that, this is the purpose of the application, what it's built on tech stack wise, that it has Docker available, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and this is, I mean, this is all pretty useful, right? Because this is all stuff that's got to be stored in the database, the models themselves. And I switched over to actually viewing the code itself as we're looking through this, Ken.
Oh, cool.
So like, let's see, because the attachment model, cipher, I mean, I'm looking at user right now because that's interesting to us. Password hashes, obviously a salt associated with the hash. Iterations, password hint.
Yeah. Let me so secret. For the information it still holds.
Invitation, so you can invite people into organizations, I take it, and to use Bitwarden or Vault Warden. User implementations. Two-factor belongs to Authenticator. Oh, here's the different two-factor types, right?
Sweet. Okay, so for different two-factor types, you have
Authenticator. So I take it Authenticator is one. So that's Google Authenticator. Email, I'm sure, is just like sending a code to email. Duo, YubiKey, UDF. I don't know what Remember is. Organization Duo, WebAuthn. Interesting. Database. Okay, so I don't need to dig too far into there. Organization wise, UID, name, billing email, private key, pub key, user org, user organization, access all Boolean. That may come into play later. Like some nice mass assignment or whatever there, maybe.
Access all.
Yeah, it looks like it's because this ties a user to an organization and basically gives them some sort of privileges in the organization, at least from what I'm understanding here, right?
So let's put that down as a risk to brainstorm. I'll write that down right now. So
yeah,
for
let's not get too.
So for brainstorming risk, let's say mass assignment for all access. I don't think I saw a role attached to, or I didn't see a role specifically called out.
No.
If I inside of the user. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So there's owner, admin, user, manager.
Yep.
Okay. So what are the different types of roles? We've got owner, admin, user, manager, and that's on top of the two different. Maybe we should even consider, by the way, I was thinking about this in the future, revamping this checklist to have what are the different roles and then what are the various actor types, right? Like actor types being, is it a, like for us, like a GitHub app versus a Pat V2 or Pat usage, just like who's actually, or which way is someone, the actor type and then the role of that actor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just because permissioning, but like anyways, I don't want to get too down in the weeds now, but we could be, we don't want to get too restrictive either. Like it's nice the way we have different roles and then we kind of like break it down between, okay, two different actor types, user and organization. And, potentially those have each their own permissions attached to them, or those things own collections. Like maybe collections is a collection of, say, passwords. And then, say like a collection could belong to maybe a user organization. I guess we'll find out in the models how the associations work. But I'm wondering if it isn't like a user has a collection, organization has a collection, and then you have permissions to access those collections. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to figure out what that authorization matrix looks like. Yeah, because it looks like in collection save, there's different things that happen.
Yes. Okay, so there's collections and user collections. If you look at collections under, oh, sorry, you are. Yeah. So if you go up to the top of collections, you can see right away there's belongs to right there on line 8. Organization, and that's collection, and then the table name on line 17, user collection, and it belongs to the user. So I think.
So it's basically a series of items that are stored in the database that are associated with either an organization or a user.
Cool. That's what I was thinking when I saw that naming convention.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So, I mean, I know we've got like a bunch in there already. Do we want to skip to, let's see. Do we want to jump? Yeah, we got a bunch of behavior, roles, some concerns. You threw all access under brainstorming risks. Let's build out the tech stack though really quick, right? I mean, we know it's Rocket and Rust, but I know there's more to it than that.
Yeah. Plus it's like what versions of Rocket and Rust?
Yeah. How does Rust actually do versioning?
I have no idea. I was going to ask you.
Cargo.lock. Ha! I found it.
Yep. So cargo.toml would probably be the one that the developers and like let's tell people that too. Just briefly lay that out. That like the cargo.toml file. So in these like package manager, which Cargo is a package manager. I actually forgot about that for Rust. But yeah, so in these package managers, usually there's a lock file, and then there's the like not lock file. So it's toml, or it's a gem file, or it's requirements.txt, or whatever it might be, or not requirements.txt, package.json. Sorry. In any case, what we're saying here is that the one that's the locked file will show you all of the dependencies and subdependencies and all that, and so it's like good for detecting like known CVEs and packages. But if you really want to know, and I like Seth said this once, and I really liked, so I'm just going to repeat you, which
Okay.
is if you look at the other file, you get to know what did the developers actually intend to be included in the application.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, if we skip straight to lock, it's going to have all the dependencies, right, that are in there too that are locked. But yeah, you're right. The TOML file itself is written by the developers. They're pulling in very specific items that they intend to use. And I mean, right off the bat, right, we know there's some sort of SQL database because there's calls either to MySQL, Postgres, or SQLite. Right?
What's really unique about this is that each of the libraries seem to have a comment above them explaining what they are. Now, this is not normally what Seth and I come across at all. Usually it's, oh, either I know that name or that name makes enough sense, like MySQL client, right? That's an easy one. Or it's like, I have no idea. I need to Google this. And it seems like it, then you kind of put it into the bucket. Either this kind of matters and we should focus on it, or it doesn't present much risk. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. But SQL is important, obviously. How we're storing those secrets and that data, and I'm really interested too on how it is being stored. Right, like are they really encrypting everything? I mean, this is definitely going down into the risks, right? Um, but behind the scenes, since this is a self-hosted password vault, like like are they using like the master key to actually encrypt everything before it's pushed into the database, right? Like I assume that's the model that they're following, but that's one of the things that I'm gonna flag because that gives me sets my spidey sense tingling, right? As far as yeah, there's a database. How is that actually encrypted? What's actually going on with those secrets? Are they encrypted by the app before it's pushed into it? Are they using the master password or the master key from the users to encrypt those secrets? Or to unlock, right? Like that whole process, there's a lot going on there that I'm interested in, right?
Okay.
But okay, so we've got SQL, so MySQL, Postgres, SQLite. I don't know if I saw a Rocket. Oh, Rust version. There you go, 1.59.
Okay, there we go. Cool. I'll write that down.
What do we have here? Use syslog 401 logging.
Rocket is version 050 RC1.
There you go. Yep, I see it. Web framework. WebSockets library, message pack, async features, generic serialization, deserialization framework.
I saw that. Now, supposedly the thing with Rust is it's supposed to be this super secure. I heard that about Golang too. But anyways, it's supposed to be some super secure language that doesn't have flaws. So
That doesn't
yeah, we'll
have
see.
flaws. Yeah.
In the language, not obviously in like, but that's
Not
I
in
don't
the
know.
packages.
That's what the cool kids have told me.
That's
So
not
I don't
cool
know.
kids. Who are these cool kids?
People that are not you and
What
I,
did they do
Seth.
to you? What did they do to you?
Yeah.
Derive, Saturday. I mean, that's probably not super important. Crypto related libraries, Rand and Ring. I mean, I know Rust is fairly new, but anytime that I see zero dot third party libraries, I have concerns just from a strict how actual, how mature is the actual project behind it. Um,
Yeah.
even Rocket, right? 0.5 RC, like RC says release candidate to me, right?
They have a lot of encoding libraries. They have a data encoding library. they have a URL encoding style
UBK.
library, percent encoding, and puny code conversion libraries.
Template library, handlebars. Write that down.
Handlebars? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Where'd you see that at? What line is that?
113.
113. Cool. Handlebars template library. So this is important for those following because we always like to know if there are ways to render content in an unescaped manner, and basically what are the sharp edges and problem areas for the templating language. To introduce obviously cross-site scripting being part of that. Sometimes they do dynamic rendering, and if you ever incorporate user input, that can be an issue. You can have server-side template injection. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other relevant vulns for templates. But yeah, anyways, it's always good to know your templating language. So let's see here.
Try to see if there's anything else that's standing out to me. Those encoding libraries are definitely interesting. They've got a JWT library. They've got the token libraries like TOTP, Ubico, U2F. Right.
TOTP, Ubico. I have too many screens up. That's part of my issue here. Let me see. Let me just close some stuff down. Okay, there we go. Now I can see what's going on your screen and my screen. I've got like notes on one side, StreamYard on the other, and like Docker / command line / code all in the other. So
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, I see JSON web token. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start annotating like the token libraries. So JSON web.
I'm sure there's. I mean, I don't know if dependency check works against cargo files or cargo.toml and cargo.lock, but I'm sure there is something else that we can run against it, just to do a sanity check when we get to the configuration review, if and when we get that far. So I'm not super concerned right now. It's more about getting to know what the application is using. I think Diesel is important. That's their ORM and query builder for the different SQL libraries. Everything is being called through Diesel. I saw that being used.
Hey, what? I know they supported Postgres, MySQL. Was there one other I missed?
SQLite, just SQLite.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Seems to be the pretty common pattern for these web apps. And yes, Larry, I need more I do have a second monitor there I could be technically plugging in, so I may have to switch to that. We'll see. Maybe I'll stream you over there, Seth, so I can look at you in your terminal, and then they're on those like monitor hands, so I could move them into place. So we got WebAuthn RS.
Cool. Okay, let me see where you're at there.
UTF. All right, so we've got Diesel template, fun with crypto. All right, so HTTP client request. Broadly, socks, cookies, trust DNS. Cookie store, open SSL. Nothing ever goes wrong with OpenSSL. Cool. Yeah. So I think we have a pretty good handle on all that. Async futures, WebSocket libraries. So we've got a WebSocket library. That's interesting. Lazy initialization, numerical libraries. Got some MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, license build. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty useful so far.
Yeah.
Ooh, the build.rust.
Really? Well, should I swing back over? I was just going to show
No,
now.
no, no, no. You don't have to look at it. I was just like, you just like hurt my eyes after the first second I looked at it because I'm not, as used to looking at Rust code.
All right. So tech stack, Rocket Rust, template laying is handlebars. There's encoding libraries, token libraries, desalt ORM, and query builder. I mean, I did see request in there too, which is like a library for making requests, like HTTP requests out. So if it's using other web services or something else, it would be using that. I'm not super concerned about that so far. So off the top of your head then, Ken, right? Like I've got that I put in the risk about storing secrets, are they using encryption keys properly? How's that being handled? Yada, yada, yada. What other risks do you have? Like what else? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Tickles your
guess it comes
fancy
down
right
to.
now.
Oh, well, obviously account takeovers are going to be a big one. But like that's always auth is always. Yeah, so let me try to think through this. I think any like randomization that's occurring if it's not done properly, right? Like if we're using I have no idea about any of these libraries, so if they're using like you get your typical sort of like randomization issues. You've got your one thing to look at because we saw JSON web tokens being generated is whether or not the library um, like if it's something that you need to configure in terms of what am I trying to say, the actual like crypto algorithm. Remember in some libraries if you don't explicitly define crypto algorithms it just defaults to like nothing, though that's probably not a huge concern here. I don't know, I'm fried. For now, I think like mainly I'm curious. Really, I feel like the risk would be in the API section, right? Like any sort of there's a lot done here via the API. So my concern is like obviously retrieving some way to retrieve secrets
Receiving
or
secrets without permissions. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you because that's going to be the biggest thing, right? Like you share a secret. How long is that good for? Is it, like there seems to be a lot of that sort of functionality available, just from a password vault perspective, being able to share secrets, whether that's like via link to invite someone in, how that's actually sent out, how it's handled, how it's validated. Like authentication is huge, right? How do you validate that someone is who they say they are and they have access to the proper creds or the proper passwords in this case?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's on top of just kind of the typical authorization stuff, right? Like if I have access to one organization, I shouldn't be able to see another organization's secrets. Those are all kind of standard, vertical and horizontal authorization checks.
Well, you can do. I mean, they've got all the CRUD operations for actually like creating and deleting and updating an organization. By the way, I'm looking at the organization within the API routes defined, and so there's like you can get organization tax, get plan tax rate. Wait, is this host billing information too?
It might, it might be the kind of thing that you could stand up and then sell access to, right? I mean, Bitwarden in and of itself does that because it's a hosted service, right? Like an enterprise can pay for access, but I don't know yeah, it feels strange to me that they re-implemented that in Vault Warden, but maybe they have.
They do have a way to get to list all of the users in an org, as well as to list and delete and perform CRUD operations on the collections that belong to an org. That would be
Okay.
very scary, I would think. They can re-invite users. Bulk re-invite users. Interesting. Confirm invites. So similar, I'm guessing, to how we do on GitHub, where you can manually confirm an invite. Cool. So I see the pattern for how they're defining their actions as well, and what the actual. This is interesting. It's very
well. Yeah, let's roll back a little bit because I want to dig into Rocket before we go too far. Because I mean, I know you and I have never seen it. I mean, I've listed out a bunch of these risks. This is just kind of off the top of our head. I feel like we've got a pretty good idea as far as what we're actually dealing with from a functionality perspective. I know we don't know it completely yet, but from a functionality perspective, at least we're slowly getting there. Oops.
Yeah, we can probably look at the route definition documentation for Rocket. I mean, what's interesting is when you look at this file, they've got aliases defined at the top of each one of the API routes. So under the API folder, they have a bunch of these Rust files. Inside the Rust files, at the very top of them, they have. So if you go under source and you go under API and
hold on, let me jump in. Source API. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
I
so
see.
If you go down to just, I don't know, like, which one am I in? I'm in the organization one, but they're all pretty much the same. Yeah, exactly. See what you're looking at there? WebRS. So it's interesting. What I noticed was, so on line 60, so like line 66 and 65. So the function name being attachments is a route defined at the very top of the file. And then above that function is where it actually has, and I assume that's is that a comment or is that actual code?
No, because the comments look below here on line 70. That's what a comment looks like.
Right.
So
okay,
this
so that is
has to
the
be
route
actually
definition.
code. Yeah, that has to be the route definition. And then it makes sense because UUID corresponds with that UUID, file ID in the path parameters. Right. But where did you see that? Oh, okay. So routes here.
Yeah. It's really strange. I mean, if you go to, see how they have routes bang?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so depending obviously on what we enable in our development environment or prod or whatever, like it'll vary on what routes will be accessible, it looks like there. So why we say that is on line 16, they've got this if else kind of statement going, and it says if the web vault's enabled, these routes will be available. Otherwise, these routes will be available. So that, first of all, that is, I mean, essentially some form of authorization there. So that's interesting. But then see this public function routes. So what's interesting about that is that's where they declare like what all routes are going to be accessible, and then but the actual path that like what it's going to look like seems to be defined above the function name. So I don't know. That's pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, because they're async functions. They're not necessarily public functions. They're only exposed if that public function decides to expose them, right?
Right.
And I mean that's just what I was going to get into with this Rocket. So I pulled up the Rocket website, right? Rocket documentation here. And honestly, like we have so little experience with it so far that, I'm not, get started. It's probably where we want to go, right? Introduction, yes. Requests, handling requests, overview, core concepts, routing. See, look at that. Parses incoming HTTP requests into native structures. Determines which request handler to invoke by matching against route attributes declared in your application. Validation, that's important. Incoming request against types and guards present in the matched route. If failed, forwards the request to the next matching route or calls another handler, processing. Wow, so this is almost like that diagram that we show in the course, Ken. Routing,
Yep.
validation, processing, response. Woohoo.
That's
Okay.
literally what our diagrams say. That's so that's
Okay.
awesome. I mean, it's the
Yep.
typical way that, I mean, we're sitting here looking at something completely different and it's all the same, right? Like, even though it's something we've never seen before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, they've got their example here, their hello world, right? Static string response. But that is just what we were looking at in that web.rs file from Vault Warden, right? So the pound and then the get request for world. So that's the route attribute, as they call it. So instead of an @ sign, it's a pound sign for Rust. All right, easy enough. Translates over. The request handler is that function. It's returning a static string. Awesome. Okay. So that's what we're going to look for. It's not like Rails where there's the routes RB file, right? That's static somewhere. It looks like these can be anywhere based on what I'm reading or what we've seen.
Yeah.
It's just a get definition, so it's a little bit more like Express or Flask, in that you can set up those definitions wherever you want. As long as it gets sourced in and compiled, then it'll append those routes to the current running application.
Where does the validation occur?
Let me see. There's mounting. Looks like, oh, okay, so we have to mount that, calling it out. All right, that's fine. Launching, sorry, I don't know. Futures
Oh,
and
no.
async. Async, yeah, I don't know.
Let me look at Authorization Decorators, Rocket. Well, that was useless. Authorization.
So it says that it validates the incoming request against types and guards present in the matched route. So it must be during that route attribute or request handler that it happens. Let me see it. Let me dive in a little bit, because you've got a request handler. Yep. Okay. So in the request handler, it can define types of the dynamic path segment or types of several different dynamic path segments. So like in those get requests, if it's a string or an integer, type of incoming body data. So the validation happens based on the definition of that, the handler function, right? Of the route handler.
No. So you gotta have to, inside of each function, you'd have to like
Yeah.
Really? Is that how that's working?
Yeah. No. Because look, just right here. So basically, name has to be a string. So for this dynamic path, right? Hello name. So if you had a UID or something else or an ID parameter there, you could probably change that from string to something else or integer. In this case, it's a string. But then we also had, I mean, if I flip back to the Vault Warden code, you'll notice that in some of those, not this one, where was I looking at? Okay, so like the attachments, they're using something called safe string, right? Which makes me think that there's some other extension to string that actually is doing some sort of encoding or something else on it. But that's where the validation happens.
But those are just types, right? That's not actually like
yeah, it's
am I
just a type.
wrong?
Yeah, you're right. So, I mean, if there's any like the safe string, when when it instantiates that safe string, there might be some sort of validation that occurs on that type. Yeah, that's all I can, or that's what I suspect, right? That's my suspicion, because I'm not seeing anything else. Yeah, see in this case, right? Hello, name, age, cool, right? So string, a U8, like an integer, bool. Yep.
I think I might have figured it. I think you might be right, and it might be a So like, for instance, when I was looking at, what was it? Or under API, and I was looking at, organization, I think, or somewhere like that. So
Organizations. Okay, I'm looking at that.
or for some reason,
Did you
it's
see
not on
something
my,
else?
I don't know why, but now I don't see it
There's
anymore.
some.
Oh, there, I found it. Okay. So yeah, if you go up to see how there's when you see online sit or actually here's a better example. If you look at if you look at headers, so if you look at like, I don't know, line 103, there's this headers, object type. And
Yep.
then what I noticed is if you look for where headers is actually defined, it
Okay.
is under auth.rs. And if I'm not mistaken here, hold on. Sorry. Every time I saw headers, there's like admin headers, request, like regular headers, like all kinds of different something headers. It's
Mhm.
defined. It seems to be defined like owner headers. It seems to be defined inside of this file. So there's manager headers, owner headers, and all of that stuff. So I think given the name of this file and knowing it's all centered around auth, and given that you just mentioned that validations are occurring during function definition, I'm wondering if that doesn't mean that it's going to basically inspect headers to see if you're authorized to do whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. Headers, user email. Interesting.
Excuse
Yeah,
me.
yeah. So there's some permissions that are in there, but they're coming out of headers. But you're right. Headers is coming from auth.rs.
And it's got a
Looks
bunch
like
of
it's
yeah,
pulling that data out of out of the JWT itself, right?
yeah.
Email, the name, org owner. Interesting.
I thought so. I'm like, well, maybe because of what you said, being that would be essentially where you would, kind of just say like what, to your point, like what things should be coming into that function, and then like obviously they're doing type checking, but if that's where, what am I trying to say? Basically, if that's where middleware and data is being placed is in the function, the parameters passed to the function, then it would make sense that if they had a headers um, type in there, that it would be like so I guess the question is, okay, so first of all, what does that definition look like? There's two questions in my mind. What does the definition look like for headers and admin headers, owner headers, whatever? I'm going to start with owner headers. What does the definition look like? And then yes. So my second question was going to be like, how are they actually saying which headers are, like owner headers, for instance, is on line 141 of organization.rs, meaning like for this delete path, it does require that you have an owner header. So then the question is like, what does that look like in depth and how it's defined? So the owner header takes a host, device, and user. Org headers from requests. So if they're able to extract org headers from the request, then, and if the headers org user type equals user org type, sorry, I'm gonna. Are you still there? Okay, real briefly, I'm gonna share my screen. I think Seth walked away, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'm here. I was just lowering my desk. So.
Oh, okay. Well, just real quick, what I was gonna wait. Which one did I do? I don't know what I'm doing, man. Hold on. Share something. Share screen, and then window would be entire screen, screen 2. Yeah, it should be. Oh no, that's why I'm I'm wackadoodle. No, that's not what I want to show you. I swear, I'm not as dumb as I'm coming off. All right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is what I want to show. So yeah, okay, so back to it.
Make it a little
organization.
bit bigger, Ken. Yeah, that's better.
Cool. So yeah, like we were talking about, this is the function definition. Sorry, that's a little too crazy. All right, that's the function definition, and it takes, to your point, the validator here, which I think can also be basically what this is, which is middleware, and like you said, probably the authorization. So then I was looking at what is owner headers in the auth.rs, like what does it do? And yeah, basically, so it takes a user host device, whatever, but essentially it tries to take create this headers object, which is extracting or from the request some org headers. And if the header object has a user type of user org type owner, so basically if you're the owner, then it's going to be 6. You need to be the owner to call this endpoint. So I guess it comes down to like understanding what is this, and then what is this, and like, is it an owner of that specific org, or is it the owner of any org? Because right now it reads like any org, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. Because as long as you're an owner, it's allowing you to, call that endpoint, right? So it is an authorization. So, and this is what we need to start doing, right? Is calling out those authorization functions, because that is one, right? Owner headers is one.
Mm-hmm. I'll start putting this into that file then.
Yeah, we need it. For sure.
And yeah, I'm going to take my screen away, and we can show your notes screen there. Cool. So under authorization mapping, authorization decorators, I'm going to have an entry for owner headers, for admin headers. There's another one.
Okay.
Let's see here. Going back, I'm gonna make it a little smaller for my own visibility here. So manager header. Wait, manager header is loose. The manager header is loose is used when you at least need to be a manager, but there's no collection ID sent with the request. Ooh, that's interesting. Huh. Okay.
Wait. Go back. Manager headers.
589 of auth.rs. 589 and 590.
589, man, this file's huge. Yeah. This file is super important. I can already tell.
Yeah, actually, in terms of mapping files, I'm just going to put auth.rs as like a important file.
No collection ID sent with the request, either in the path or as a form data. Interesting. Yeah, see, that seems to be.
Yeah.
Those could be interesting, right? Because depending on where those are implemented, how they're implemented, it looks like we've got a lot of like mesh of permissions, right? Whether that's like,
right.
Oh, you're an org admin. Does that mean that you can do something to someone else's org because all you have to be is an org admin because of that call? Or are they actually checking org admin IDs, right?
Oh, okay. When you look at the from request section for these headers, you see the actual authorization logic occur. So like from request there, you actually see there's a bit more. Well, that's okay. So this is my point. This doesn't look super. This is what we're looking at. Manager headers loose, right? Which looks similar to how owner headers looked, which is not really doing any, like, it's doing authorization saying you're a certain role, but it's not doing much else in terms of saying this is the, this is for this specific organization now, or this specific collection. So, but however, if you go up to line 545, you see that as you scroll through there is actually some logic there where it says, for instance, on line 556 specifically, it does a find by collection and user by extracting out of that JWT the org user and their user ID, UUID, and the collection ID as well. So it actually ties together to make sure that those two things in the database are used to extract things from the data. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Those two values are used. They're coming out of a JWT. So I guess that's another thing to think about, is like, how do those JWTs get generated? Is there ever a time when user supplied? I'm going to write this down as a brainstorming risk. Is there ever a time where you can forge data that goes into a JWT? Because obviously that'd be a pretty easy way to start doing anything you want against the API.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see. There's a couple people that are following along.
Oh, sweet.
No crypto algo would be awesome. Yes, Larry. T. Tosh. I'm not even sure how to say his name, but yeah. Let me make sure that everybody's got it. So it's called Vault Warden. I'll post the link back up in Slack as well. Okay. Okay, so let me think for a minute. I need to reset and figure out where I'm going, because you're defining authorization functions, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to extract out. At this point, it's like a mixture. I think to zoom out for everybody who's watching, we're kind of bouncing between brainstorming risks, basing that off the tech stack, basically off of our information gathering and profiling section of our methodology. So we're just getting to know the app. One of the parts of getting to know the app is also, sort of the initial parts are mapping of both routes as well as authentication functions. Now, that's not to say we're trying to find vulnerabilities right now in authorization functions, not authentication functions.
Jeez, get it right.
So, yeah, I know we're trying to map routes, and then how are authorizations being applied to those routes? And by routes, we mean where's the HTTP request going to hit inside the application, be processed, and then do something, right? So we are at the stage where, it makes sense to start listing out what are our authorization decorators and what are they kind of looking for. Again, it's not just looking at, like, we just pointed out, hey, for instance, when we get to, manager headers, there's this collection lookup. It extracts two different values from the JWT. So presumably if those JWTs are, securely generated, it's a validation that you are who you are. It's extracting from, like I said, the JWT values, seeing if you have a collection, and if the collection matches up with effectively the endpoint that you're trying to reach. Making sure you have permissions, essentially. And the other part of that, though, is also to, like, how does it do it, right? So, or not how does it do it, what is it using? So in this case, we know it's a JWT, but in other cases, it might not be a JWT. It might be some other type of token. It could be I've seen basic auth. It could be anything. So these are the things we're trying to basically, figure out.
Is that what it is? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to start looking for routes then, because it doesn't look like there's that many of them. But what I'm seeing, so let me flip back over. So the rocket routes use that pattern, the pound and then a get or a post. It also looks like that same decorator, that same pattern is used for other decorators. So the interesting ones that I have right now are, get and post for the APIs. But let me show the code again as I flip back over there, and we'll start to jot those down, at least the interesting ones from the different files. So,
Pun intended.
yes,
Jot it down.
you should jot it down. All right.
That's becoming, by the way, that's becoming a holy war. Like some people are I can tell you at work are on a hardline stance that no, I'm never calling it jot, and other people obviously not so much. So it's becoming like a tabs versus spaces conversation.
Yep. Okay, and this is the other interesting thing too, because there's a git slash. It's under admin. Makes me think that there's probably, another way that route is being loaded up, because it's probably /API/admin/. So I'm still missing one of the pieces there on the flow, right?
Sorry, what part are you missing?
Just where the those route definitions, like there's a GET request there for admin, right?
Uh-huh.
But those routes, okay, those are all the routes that are defined by the admin. I'm just saying it's probably /admin/, right? So I'm trying to, where is admin being loaded from is my question, and how
Oh,
are
the
those routes being
prefix.
defined? Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying like a prefix for that / route. Gotcha. What's rank
Yeah.
equals 2 and rank equals 1 mean?
Yeah, those are interesting, aren't they? Let's see, because there's rank equals 2.
Like this
I don't
route's
know.
lesser than the other route.
Yeah, that might be it, right? Rank equals 2, rank equals 1.
That route number 2 is fucking garbage. Route 1 forever.
Route 1
I don't know what
lives
rank even
on.
means. Exactly. I have no idea what this even means. I feel so lost. This is okay.
Okay. Well, let me see, because admin.rs, it's got to be pulled in somewhere else, though, right?
Damn, there's a lot of okay. Jeez. This is a huge file, this auth.rs. Crikey.
Yep. Let's see, main.rs. That pulls everything in. That's a good place to start.
Do you
Rocket
think
main.
do you think that the so in that auth.rs file there's a client IP function, and it's the comment above it says client IP address detection. Do you think I should list that? Like, is that, you think maybe some way
Yeah,
that
there may
okay.
be some authorization tied to that. I mean, at worst, we go down a rabbit hole for a little bit and move on.
Sounds good.
Startup. Check RSA keys. Check Web Vault. Create database pool. Launch Rocket. Base path. Ha! I told you. Look, right there. I found
Where's
it.
that? Oh, nice. Great success.
Great success.
Yes.
So main.rs, yes. So you've got
So are
/API.
you know how they do that inside, like, say, the admin file under the API? Do they are they, when they do their route definitions, are they like, where's that is the class name like core routes or web routes or admin routes or identity routes or whatever? Is that how that works?
Yeah. So so we look at this first one here, line 341.
Mm-hmm.
You see it calls API web routes. So web routes is are defined within web.rs, if I remember right.
Okay.
And they've got to be exposed though. So this is routes, web vault enabled. It's web index, but I would expect them to be. Let's see if web routes is in here anywhere else. No. API. I wonder if that's just meta programming.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Because I'm not seeing like what is API. What is that actually?
Oh, I see it. I think I see it. Yeah. So if you go under mod.rs, so it's under it's like a main file under API folder.
Yeah. So there's that's the API definition, right? Yep. Web : routes is web route. So that's how it's cool.
Yeah.
It was defined
I've noticed
somewhere. I knew it.
crate being referenced a lot, and I feel like maybe
we should know what that is.
It's got to be like, I'm guessing it's a core component of Rocket, because like you don't see, I don't think I saw in the TOML file crate. Let me look for
that's
it
a
in that TOML
Rust
file.
package repository. I just had the best crate opening in Rocket League. That's what I came up with when I Googled Rocket crates.
Oh.
All right.
Use crate. It must be like how you call packages, basically. So
yeah, because it's calling other API. So
yeah,
in the API directory, right? I guess, right? Yeah. Routes. Okay, so I'm going to flip back to main because I'm going to start to define these down, right? Where did I find them before? They're all the way down at the bottom here. All the base paths. / API. I want to define all of these, right? And then we'll do things inside of those. So we've got / and then that corresponds to web routes. Got API, and I know everybody's just looking at those. I'm just documenting in our notes as we go through the core routes. Admin routes. Identity. That's probably important for security. And icons. Let's see if that's something I can pay attention to. Icons routes. Because overall, I don't feel like there's a ton of routes in here, and maybe I'm missing some because it's notifications.
Oh, I see how this is going.
Okay. So let's jump into it. Let's look at those web routes and define those really quick because they were in web.
There was authorization for owner headers because when it does the let what is it shit, I don't remember. If you go down to if you look at owner headers, at some point it calls org headers from request, which is the actual like authorization function for org headers. So effectively it does two things. It makes sure that the request you're requesting for is like you belong to that org. So then owner handler on top of that, like once that actually does occur and it passes that check, then owner headers will say, okay, well, are you an owner role? So, I guess the situation there is that if any endpoint ever did not, well, I don't even know the case. Yeah, you know what? I was going to say maybe there would be a route defined that, you don't need to pass it an org ID, but like, I don't think that's, it's a nonsense thought. So I'm going to just write under owner headers. It looks like it's doing authorization using authorization takes two things into account. Do you belong to the org you're requesting to do something against? and I call it and
doesn't have a ton. Okay, app.id.json. Find trusted apps. Bunch of stuff. Ooh. Path buff. Web files. That looks interesting. Basically under slash. There's like a catch-all. Check this out. Rank is 10. So there's another rank that I'm seeing, right? Only match this if other routes don't match.
Dude, that's a dangerous freaking pattern. That's a dangerous assumption. So wait, you can have multiple paths defined in the same way and give them rank. And then if the one path fails, then the second path would be hit. Like, what if the first path fails because authorization failed, and then it just goes to the second one and there's no authorization on the second one, for example? Like, that does not seem like a great pattern.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's opening. It's basically opening a file based on that. I mean, it's pulling some stuff out of config, but that's a fail open style lookup, right?
It seems like a very dangerous pattern. Like, I don't think I like that. Just, I mean, it could be amazing and wonderful, and I don't understand how it works well enough, and I'm stupid. But at first, glance seems, it seems like a bad idea. It seems like a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine, Ken.
It's always fine. It's always fine. That's why cyber insurance exists.
Yeah, because it's all fine.
It's all dope.
I love things like /alive and /status when I'm doing assessments. Honestly, right?
Yeah.
Alive checks, right? DB connections.
Hey, dude, some of these error messages inside these auth handlers, by the way, they actually tell you like, oh, this user doesn't belong to the org, or this user does belong. The current user isn't confirmed member of the organization. The current user isn't a member of the organization.
Hey, that's user enumeration. Woohoo!
If the org doesn't exist, error getting the organization ID. It'll tell you that something does exist, but then it'll error out if you don't have access to tell you need to be an admin owner to call that endpoint. So,
okay, so now we need
it's definitely a lot of enumeration in this API. It looks like at first glance.
Yeah.
The current user isn't a manager for this collection. So again, you've got collection enumeration, but this is where I think we should point out to our users. Sometimes people just don't care. Sometimes it's within the bit. Sometimes that's like completely not a factor, and sometimes it's completely is a factor. I would think with a password manager, any enumeration might be a little scary and rough. And yeah.
Wow, I'm trying to find core routes because there might be a whole bunch in here.
Oh, our notes are shareable. We're going to put them. Sorry, one of the questions from the chat. I suck at checking chat. Are your notes shareable? Yeah. So we are maybe next. No. Yeah. I mean, they are. And
yeah, at the very least, we'll put them up in our GitHub repository. It really depends on what we find in the next probably half hour or so tonight.
Now I'm thinking like if it would be nice if we could like live display those notes, not through here, but through some other means. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I don't know. Anyways, how much more time do we got here? Probably another half hour.
Yeah, we probably got another half hour tonight. I mean, it's I'm wondering if I want to map out all these routes.
Or Jeff asks, you sure that's not like conditional access doing checks down a list, and the list is the rank?
It could be.
Conditional access. Maybe.
Yeah. That's on the, I'm sure that's on the rating or whatever it was, right? Organization. That's deserialized. That's not, those are or data. Because there's a whole bunch of routes. Get user collection, get org collections. So in organizations. So it seems like under API, there's core. And there's a bunch of routes in all those files.
So by the way, here's the route ranking explained. So the routes rank is set so that routes with static paths, so no parameters, no dynamic parameters like a UUID or an org ID or whatever, are ranked higher than routes with dynamic paths, the ones that actually do take arguments or dynamic. Yeah. And then routes with query strings but static segments are ranked higher than routes with fully dynamic queries. So I guess that'd be the RESTful bits not changing, but the parameters, like having query string parameter values to the RESTful path. Routes with queries are ranked higher than routes without queries. So, but it really doesn't explain what you would use. Like what does that mean? Does that mean? So confusing.
I mean, does it have something to do with like caching?
It's almost like you could call the same routes in different ways, and then I don't know why you would want to do this, but it almost seems like, I guess what I'm saying is it almost seems like it has to do with how is the request that you're sending in the path portion, or not the path, the entire, like, yeah, I guess technically it's the HTTP path portion if you consider the query parameters part of that as well. So depending on how that's formed, creates like how, like which one gets called, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Which is, again, I don't know that I like that. That does not seem. Again, if I'm understanding that correctly, it really does come down to you could be calling different endpoints depending on how you format the same sort of query, which does not make sense to me. You have to look at this. Hold on, let me share this real quick so it's clear to people what I'm talking about.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Let's see here.
There is definitely a username enumeration in the registration section.
Oh yeah, that does not. Yeah. Okay. So, right. So here's the kind of the breakdown that I was talking about. Query strings with static segments are ranked higher than routes with fully dynamic queries. So that'd be like every part of it's dynamic, or most parts of it are dynamic. And they show there's actually different, there's different ways to call, similar things, right? So, well, or is it? No, because now these don't look.
But what does that? What does that actually do, though? Right? Like what does the rank?
I think it Yeah, I think it actually renders it. Panics. Oh no, that's panic. Okay, what the? I don't know, man. I have to like keep doing a little bit more homework. I'm not sure. This is super weird to me. Static path fully. But this is a totally different route altogether, though.
Yeah, so they're not the same. So it's not like it's
yeah.
They're not the same routes. So I'm questioning. So the ones that we were looking at with ranks were definitely the same routes.
Right. So that means to me that it's going to, I don't know, hit one over the other. All right, let me continue digging. Let's share your screen again.
Okay. I mean, the user registration.
I don't want to stick on it too much, but I am curious. Sorry.
It's always problematic for username user enumeration. I guess it's email. It's fine by mail. That's how they're doing emails, or it's not usernames. But the user already exists if signups are allowed, right? And even if they're not, yeah, this is interesting, right? Like even if registration is not allowed, no, you're going to get different error messages whether or not the user exists. I need to think about that flow a little bit. I'm going to put that in our list of things to look into.
Oh, dude, here is a very. Oh, sorry. What's that?
I was just saying registration authentication flow is weird with the is sign up allowed stuff.
Oh,
there's different error messages. So anyway, it's nothing huge.
So the rank, back to that. I finally got it sorted, dude. So here's the actual sort of reason that this would occur. So let's say you take a UUID and an like let's say /users is the prefix. The next is going to be either /email or /UUID. Well, technically, you could just like convert a UUID to an integer if you needed to or whatever. So let's say we had two routes. Get /users email, but that's going to specifically say a type of a string. And then let's say we have /users /UUID, and that is, it's going to be taken as a string, but obviously it's not necessarily a string. So in those cases, what you can do is you can say like, when the request comes in, it doesn't know which one's an email and which one's a UUID, right? In that case, because how could it, right? It's not. It's just going to take a string with both of those functions, and it doesn't like I said, it's dynamic. Like the email portion is just a placeholder. So what happens is if you send a request for UUID, but it hits email first because it's ranked number 1, it's going to surely fail, right? Because it gets converted to an integer or it attempts to get converted to an integer, but it's the email function, so it doesn't get like converted and it causes an error. Then the second, and it will literally forward it onto the second endpoint and say, and so this is why, by the way, I'm like, this is really a bad idea. So then it'll hit the second endpoint, and then presumably it'll be cast to, let's say, an integer, and then it actually would work. It's just one example, right? Like I could kind of make up based off of some documentation I'm reading here.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's basically the order in which something is processed if they have quote unquote similar patterns. So
right, because it takes a dynamic variable name.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not doing a regex check, right? At least not in the route definitions we're seeing. It's always a question of if we can do regex in the route name. Maybe it is that's a different thing. But since it's not regex, it's just some placeholder value. Then if there's another route that's defined or several routes defined that look kind of similar, but then that parameter doesn't match up with what that dynamic variable is supposed to be, then it'll go to the one that it should be.
This makes sense then, right? So I'm looking at admin.rs in API, and there's two routes for / right, for the main folder, whatever, or the main call. The first one basically does a cast and is looking for admin token, and that's probably what happens. If that fails, then what happens? The rank 2 actually flashes you and pushes you to admin login, right?
Now this adds a unnecessary now additional mental complex model that we have. This is actually, to me, I gotta say, man, not a fan at all. Don't like this level of flexibility. I could see so many scenarios where this would actually go wrong. This actually seems very problematic from a design perspective.
Yeah. But I mean, as long as it's simple enough that you can hold that all in your head and you've got it documented, that's great, right? Like,
until you get to a monolith.
Yeah, until you get to a monolith, right? Exactly, where you have 100 different paths that could all match up. And that's why, and that's like when we get to that one open path, right, that's coming from a web vault folder or whatever it is, that we start to think that's problematic because things fall back to that eventually as rank 10. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It seems really bad. Because like I said, what was the original scenario I was talking about? If authorization fails because authorization fails, does it then default to the second route? And presumably, I mean, I guess we could dig in deeper to see if there's like like the last I don't know, man. Like I think the error on all of those from request authorization checks was I think everything just raised an error. So again, I'm not sure if there's like I don't know if you invoke this method and it does hiccup an error, but it also executes the chain of or halts the chain of execution, or if it's going to be just you just throw an error and then you would default to the second route. I don't know. I suspect it's actually just it's all the same. You throw an error in the authorization function, and now it's going to send that over to another route. Maybe I think that might be what we're talking about. That is where I think seriously there could be some serious, like legit authorization issues.
Yeah.
That come up.
Well, I mean, it's super interesting because I just did a search through the code base for rank, right? And so now that we understand it better, right? V2 API for uploading actual data content of an attachment. This route needs a rank specified so that Rocket prioritizes this, the V2 route, which would otherwise conflict with this one, right? So they've already started to run into collisions because of this. You look at the form of this dynamic variable, and it makes sense, right? You've got ciphers, UUID attachment, and then some attachment ID, but it's given a rank, what, 1 in this case, so that it falls in after the V2 route, which has priority that they want to give priority to. I would almost, man, if I was developing, I think I would avoid the rank system. I'll be honest.
Right?
Phil's probably yeah.
I can't
Phil's
imagine that being a good idea.
Yeah. So that's in ciphers, right? Core ciphers.
I'm gonna grab a water real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to continue documenting endpoints then. I was into core routes. Let's see where we were at there, because there was a whole bunch of core routes that we were looking at. So anything in the core directory based on what's going on not in ciphers, but not in crypto. Where was it at? In mod.rs, where it's actually loading all that up. Core routes is anything that's in core, which is the directory that we're in. So any of those files, as they get pulled in, actually have something interesting. So we'll spin through, first of all, through account, because there's a whole bunch of routes in here: register, profile, put, post, get, public keys, post keys, post.
So is that our authentication set of API endpoints?
Password, pre-log, verify passwords in here. So yes, but I'm not sure. I mean, we could look really quick because I mean, we know that's important. So I'll throw that into API core routes. Let's look and see what authenticate password looks like.
All right, I'm going to go back to, while you're doing that, I'm going to go back to actually documenting what the authorization decorators do, what their purpose is.
Okay.
Just so I don't stray, so I don't go down the dreaded rabbit hole before I get everything kind of in the methodology.
Okay, so that's the verify password route, secret verification request. Yeah. Check valid password, master password hash. It's coming in from data. Okay, so it looks like it has to be a secret verification request. Looks like API key does the same thing. So API key, that's another authentication endpoint that's checking an API key, right? Oh, that's rotating an API key, so you're setting it up. post. Let's see, rotate API key, post accounts API key. That's right here. That's interesting that it's still, still checking the master password hash that's coming in with the API key. That seems interesting. Oh, no. Okay, I need to look at secret verification request. But that's going to be a further trace in. But API key is important because we're doing rotation. And there's a lot coming at us here. Accounts API key. I'm not sure if we want to document all of the routes. I'm just trying to pick out some interesting ones, Ken. Because I don't think we're going to have time to go through everything, at least. Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll do a follow-up on this one because we haven't actually got to any of the tracing.
Yeah, and we may just like expand out through some of these sections just to make sure they're already pre-filled out by the time we come back to the episode, and then just dig into more of like the authentication, auditing, injection, things like that. But this is fun, man. Like I'm learning a new framework altogether. I've never seen this before. It's actually something, and we'd asked folks, and I looked into this. Rocket does seem to be the main Rust web framework that folks are using, and this is obviously just an application built on top of the Rust framework. But given that this is something new, something we want to kind of get familiar with as it's being built out and possibly used, then yeah, it's just useful. It's useful to know. It's fun. It's cool. I don't know the Rust language very well, so it's pretty easy to follow along with. It actually kind of, it's, if I'm being honest with you, it looks like some weird mixture between like Node and Ruby. It's
yeah. There's a little bit of meta programming that it feels like that is in there. Yeah.
I have a feeling this rank structure thing, man, is a big deal, and in a bad way. I'm not kidding, and I don't mean just for this web app. I just mean for the ecosystem. But whatever. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Email. There's some email verification, and I'm wondering if it actually even requires a token. Maybe that's actually just sending out the token. Interesting. I'm looking for, so as I'm digging through the routes to find interesting ones, right? Like anything that kind of changes data or updates passwords or authenticates users, right? So I'm not just talking about username and password, but anytime that we're checking things like API keys, we're checking things like email tokens. I want to know, because that's places where it can fall down. And when we get to the authentication portion, we'll dig further into those and how that's actually happening. But right now I'm just trying to, like, what is this? A security stamp, right? Like, I don't know what that actually means in context of the application here, right? But it's passing in some sort of password data, checking whether or not the user has a valid hash, and then it's deleting all by user. Reset security stamp. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what that is doing. That's going to require some more.
So that full access, remember how in the beginning you were talking about mass assignment with full access?
Yep.
So where I see where I see this happening is that if an org user, under the manager headers section decorator, if there is a what am I trying to say? If the collection ID has been passed in, right, with a request. So this is where it gets weird, because this manager header is going to be used for multiple endpoints. Some of those endpoints will not be taking a collection ID, but it'll need to make sure that you're a manager, admin, or owner, which is what this decorator does. It's manager or above. However, if it's an endpoint that's going to require a collection ID, then it'll do an additional check within this decorator that says, if you, as a user, have full access to that org, it'll bypass a lookup verification that you were a part of that org. Does that make sense? So if you have on your account that basically if you have full access equals true on your user account, it looks like, unless I'm misreading this, it's going to bypass the actual collection model lookup to verify that you are an actual user of that org or of that collection. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's where that mass assignment comes into play, right? I figured that was something interesting. And this always goes back to like Spidey sense, right? Like, we start looking through these models, and stuff like that sticks out to you and I, right? Like pretty quickly, because it's always that security sensitive stuff where we've seen problems occur in the past.
Yeah.
Which is the whole reason that like I zeroed in on it so quickly. Is I was like, wow, that looks interesting. We're getting into it a little bit, but again, we don't want to go down the dreaded rabbit hole because we do that all the time. But at the same time, now that we're digging into it more, it's just we're pulling back we're peeling back the layers one at a time, and it does look like there is going to be some issue there, or there is a possibility of it, and it would be something that I'd be looking at as far as, hey, if I can escalate my privileges, if I can set that in some way, then all bets are off, and I can get to all these collections and game over as far as Vault Warden's concerned, right?
It's a common pattern to see people go through all these intricate steps to make sure that all these little bits are done right, but then give a exit strategy to make sure that you don't have to go through all those checks, because it can be somewhat cumbersome. So that's an interesting sort of thing, like with computer science, as you see as the complexity kind of increases with the amount of controls that you put into place, the need for some sort of escape hatch it becomes more and more a priority. So like what I'm thinking is, if you look at with Rails strong parameters, where you have to explicitly define the parameters that should be allowed into a controller's action or actions, because of how stringent that can get, you did see people do like .permit bang, or you'll see people call methods that are escape hatches for doing things the proper way, just because it gets too hard. So I think that's your Spidey sense is dead on. And in this case, by the way, I think the abuse case would be if you're a manager or above of just anything, like any org or a collection or whatever, then you'll pass that check. And then if you're able to have that full access on your account, then you can just pass in a collection ID to whatever route has this manager header applied to it that also takes a collection ID, and bypass this the actual verification of whether or not you belong to that collection. Because again, this is just doing it makes sure that you're a part of the org that you're requesting, but it doesn't do that for the collection. So I'll just document that a little bit more. When I scroll, am I scrolling for you too, or is it? I don't think it is, right? Okay. Cool.
No. Yeah, it's just like as you're documenting in your notes, and I'm not even showing the notes right now. I was jumping around the different routes within the core directory, right? Because it looks like that's where most everything is happening. There's this cool sync get request. It'll actually sync data based on whatever you want to send, right? JSON, domains, collections, get ciphers, UID, ciphers. What does ciphers actually do, right? Like, is that, and That's not an actual list of. Maybe it is a list of keys that have to be unlocked. I don't know.
It checks headers. What does headers do again? I forget. I don't think it does much, right?
Headers in and of itself, just headers.
Yeah, yeah. I have to go look at the top because I.
Yeah, that's UID admin. Emergency access. Ooh, this sounds fun. Emergency access. Oh. Doesn't that sound dangerous?
Yeah, it does sound dangerous. Match decode login access token. Okay, claims device UUID user UUID claims.sub. So it decodes headers decodes JWT, which is your access token, and grabs the device UUID and user UUID attributes from it, the claims from it. It does a device lookup on the UUID. It does a lookup, find the user by the UUID.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the fuck does that mean? Irrigating curve. What? I don't even know what this means. But it has a security stamp, which is like a mixture of timestamped, but also like, and this is where it gets a little confusing. I think maybe it's saying request.route and then our name is, how does the route? So is there a route from the stamp? It's like there's like some sort of route being extracted from the security stamp of the user dot security stamp not equals claim dot security stamp. I don't fucking know what a security stamp is. Anyways,
Yeah.
it
I
doesn't
did
do
see
much
some of
more
those.
than just verify that you're kind of like a user that has a device, and that you basically you got a token first of all, and that the token like makes sense basically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
not.
it's
There's not
doing
much there.
basic authorization, but it's not doing like it's more coarse grained instead of fine grained authorization if it's just doing header.
Yeah, basically validates your JWT is valid.
Yeah, emergency access looks interesting because you can invite people to have emergency access into your collections or into your as set people up as emergency contacts.
Oh,
So I don't know what sort of rights that grants someone, right? That would be, and you can reinvite them, but that fills emergency ID too is just a string. There's some indicators there of authorization, right? Like might be some sort of insecure direct object reference since it's not a UID. Oh wait,
oh
no,
yeah, maybe.
it is doing fine by UUID based on the emergency ID, but that given that I don't know. Yeah,
I'm gonna look
there
at.
still might be IDOR there.
I'm gonna put on the brainstorming section. Like, look at how UUIDs are generated.
Okay.
Because you know how sometimes they. So like for those listening, sometimes or watching. Also, if you're just listening, definitely don't do that. Watch the video. It's much more entertaining. Anyways, no, what was I saying? It's UUIDs. So sometimes what you see is like people generate this 32-bit, super long, or not super long, but fairly long value or whatever, or 16-bit or whatever, but then they'll truncate it down to like 4 or 8, and it's like, okay, that's not really, there's
Mm-hmm.
not much entropy anymore. Um, and that's where we see some issues. Or one area we see issues with UIDs. Sometimes it's just not even securely, like it's generated with like a not truly random library, or I've seen this before. I'm sure you've seen where people generate their own custom UUID functions, and it's like, yeah, it's like super basic. It's like choose from the alphabet, like 3 letters, and times it by 4, and do like some weird attempt at doing your own UUIDs. So I doubt that's the case. I do think we might have seen in the TOML file a UUID library, but nevertheless, something to investigate.
Yeah, Larry brought up timestamps to make sure you're not getting replays on some of these. I guess I'm looking at emergency accesses, and it's got a bunch of times in there.
Dude, I haven't gotten any notifications for the. Well, I was not getting any notifications about chat for Slack. I got the first one from Larry, but I haven't seen anything since then.
Yeah. Aaron saying grantee user already invited. Yeah, user enumeration. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's user enumeration all throughout this. I haven't even looked at the the main authentication routines yet either. But just a registration, grantee users not found, rejected. View. And I know we're probably starting to push up on time, Ken.
I mean, I'd like to go to sleep at some point, but I'm having fun too. So it's all
Pshaw.
Good times.
Good times.
Well,
Okay, that's emergency access. Folders has a bunch of routes. Get folder, post folder, delete folder. Slash folders, UUID, data. All right, that's great.
And if there's even one issue with the org headers check, dude, this thing's going to be screwed because everything seems to rely on the org headers check. So let's hope that's always done well.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's no problems whatsoever. Well, I'm being a little sarcastic. There might not be any problems. I don't know.
Who knows?
That's why we're doing this. Org ID. Org ID is a string. It's interesting. They've got both delete, like HTTP delete method, and then they've also got like a slash delete, like a post to slash delete. So there's two different ways to hit, for organizations, for files, for folders, right? Like I'm seeing multiple patterns to actually hit like a delete function. Leave an organization. User is not part of an organization. Interesting, but it is pulling that UUID out of the headers, so out of the JOT. So I mean, the more that we're pulling out of the headers and out of the JWT, the less enumerable it feels like, right? Can't find organization details. Owner headers. Did you say the owner headers actually do a lookup based on organization, or is it just whether or not you are an owner?
It says, I want to make sure that's actually what I was double checking, is if because I have org headers being called, and so owner headers checks. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Owner headers. So it takes two things into account. Do you belong to the org you're requesting, which is the org headers call, which every single one seems to do that, and checks that, or almost every single one, and checks that you're an owner, assuming that the check for do you belong to that org succeeds.
Okay, but the header. Okay, so look at this Git organization that I'm at right now, right?
Right.
I do Git organization. I'm passing in an org ID in the Git request, but there's no correspondence between that org ID and what's in owner headers. So if you're checking whether or not I'm in the organization that's in my JOT, that'll succeed. But then it gets down here, it does a match organization, find UUID by UUID, and it's just looking up the UUID that I'm passing in.
Yeah, and
or
it's
am I
doing
off?
that. No, you're right, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to look at this. I'm looking at it right now, org headers. So let me go down to where I saw it because I have it up. But I think it did it based off of yeah. So the org ID comes from, wait. Okay, so the get org ID does come from the request. I'm wondering if that's parameter based and not from your JWT. So headers from request, but headers. Okay, so no, that's actually from the request. Okay, I get org ID, takes in the request param string 1, UUID, parse string, org ID is okay, some org ID. So okay, org ID, no. Here's the comment above, it's better. So this is under auth.rs line 411. So it's org ID is usually the second path parameter, but there are cases where it is a query value. First, check the path. If that is not a valid UUID, try the query values. So you'd have to basically, and this is where I think this thing is going to start falling down. But okay, so the org ID is taken presumably from the path. So maybe it would not hit that get request because it should look at the query string value. Yeah, because even if you pass in an invalid org ID in the path level, then in theory, when it gets to the get request, meaning so the path is wrong, but the query string is right. So for those listening or watching, like the question mark org underscore ID equals part. Let's say that's valid, but the path for the / org ID part that's invalid. That's all fine and well, but then when it gets to the get request, it will take, I think, this is where this is a maybe, right? I think it might take that path org ID value in the path from the path, but what if it doesn't? What if it actually does take and respect the query string and overrides the path, right? So let's follow my brain here. If you go to that endpoint that you were looking at.
Yeah. Well, you are.
Let's say the bypass here, basically, in my mind, is if we can pass in a bad org ID in the path portion, but a good org ID in the query string param, and it hits that get endpoint, and the get endpoint respects not the path portion that you see defined there, org ID, but rather with a query string, then we bypass and are able to do it IDOR right there.
Okay. So basically, to craft the attack to actually exploit this, right? I just want to make sure I understand. So what you're saying is the path org ID is the first one that's checked, right?
If you go to your notes, I'm going to type it out. Yeah. So I think here, go to the very bottom. So I think if you do a request like HTTP thisSite.com and you were to do what was it, organization, and you do like non-existent number there, but then you do org ID equals like a legit one, right? Okay, what I think is going to happen is, according to this authorization filters comment, so the when it does a get org ID lookup, what it says is if the path if the path portion is that org ID number is invalid, which is going to be the case sometimes, right? Because we've established that like it's so almost too flexible. So let's say that's wrong. What it defaults to is actually the org ID parameter string that you pass in instead of the path portion. So that's what it says in auth.rs on lines 411 through 14. So then my thinking is, if this same path is hit in that endpoint you're looking at, what if it does actually, excuse me, if it actually does use this value to do the lookup, then, oh, well, shit. Okay, let me go back. Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to follow my own logic here. And now I've gone down.
No, so yeah. No, okay, dude. Okay, stop for a second. So, like, I think the path here would be, okay, I want to pass this check, right?
Right.
So I need to pass in an org ID that is valid in either of these places. And then okay, so for the GET request that I was looking at, line 186 in core, or so API core organizations.rs.
Okay.
It's pulling, it doesn't know anything about the parameters, right? There's no params equal, or, org ID equals something. It only knows about the path parameter.
Right.
But since auth.rs, the way that it doesn't return, right? It does a parse string is okay. It's just checking to see whether or not that is like, what does parse string actually do there? Whoa.
So okay, so your UUID.
No, that's UID. So it's just checking whether or not that is a valid UUID number, right? That's all that get org ID does there. It's not doing any checks, but what does get org ID actually do? Or when is it actually called?
I feel like the condition we would need is for the UUID to be valid, but like, I don't think this is what would work actually. Now that I'm thinking it through a little bit farther.
No. I think it would, because org ID. So if it's matching get org ID, what you would want to do is, so you're putting in two different values. Say I am in organization, 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Right.
But I want to access the data from 842, 8348. See, that get org ID is only returning whether or not it is a valid UUID. Outcome.
Oh, it's determining if it's not value because it's parsing a string which is representative of the org ID.
Yeah.
And if that's okay, just through the parsing of literally the formatting, then it'll go down to
match get org ID request.
I think I
feel like we're close.
ID. Yeah. So it's going to return. Okay, so get org ID is going to return a valid, converted org UUID that can be passed directly into. It's basically turning a string into a legit UUID object type, I think.
Yeah.
But then, shit, I lost my place. So that was a 411. So then, where is this? So this is back in org headers on line 436. So once we extract that org ID, then we go down to org user, and we look up user organization, find by user and org. So then we look up the user by its UUID and the organization ID. The user object comes from headers.user. I believe that's actually just a JWT claim, but we'd have to verify that. But I'm pretty sure that's not something you're tampering with unless we find that weakness. But anyway, so then the UUID has to belong to the org ID. So at this point, you actually do have to belong to the org that you're passing in. But if there's a way, because here's where I'm thinking, this is the condition that it would work, is if that the bad thing, the thing that we're going to cause, so the path portion of the UUID, the path parameter, if for some reason we're able to say, throw in a double quote to that, and it screws up the parsing and it says, boom, that's not valid. And then it's okay, I'm going to ignore that. And then let me look at that second parameter. And, it's like, okay, yeah, that UUID is both a valid UUID, plus I can like look up and see in the database you are associated with, or the UUID of that org rather is, an org you're associated with, right? Then I'll send you over to that route. You've passed the check, which is great. But at that point, that's when the logic of that endpoint is gonna take that path UUID and say, hopefully, right? Hopefully, like if it did some different formatting from this authorization function and just pass it right into that lookup, then that would be IDOR. So the bypass we're looking for is any place in this code base, and I need just to make a note of this, but yeah, any place in this code base where the path parameter UUID could be parsed in such a way that we can manipulate it to cause a failure at the authorization filter or function layer, but not cause an error when it's at the actual like defined route endpoint function. Or am I just like, it's 11 o'clock on Friday and that doesn't make sense?
No, I think you're right. The fact that we're accepting, or we can accept two UUIDs there, I mean, this is one that I would want to play with to actually see if we could get it to execute, right? Because putting those you're accepting two different organization ID parameters or org ID parameters. That get org ID validation. Yeah, all I'm saying is I'm with you, right? There could be some confusion there based on, that lookup and the order of precedence, right? It's an order of precedence error. There might not be a lot of them. Because my question is, first check the path, then try the query. I want to see where the cases are that it is a query value, right? Because if we drop it into the path as that's something we have access to, and then it's still pulling from the query value, that's where the flaw occurs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that's what I was trying to figure out, is where that's actually happening. I'm looking for, let's see, query value in the code base. Man, but I'm only seeing it in that one. Oh, that might be because I'm. Oh. Organization.
Cool. All right. I put in the notes kind of like a summarized version of what we were talking about, where there's basically like you said, order of precedence, and possibly again, we need to find out how these UUIDs from the path are being parsed by each endpoint, and if there's ever an endpoint that's like, oh, let me normalize this data differently. Oh, now because of the way I normalized it, it's not actually going to be. I've had that. I mean, you've had this. I've had this many times in applications where, some key thing like this goes awry because there's just mismatches of assumption. And it's something we've been talking about on the podcast when you talk about service-oriented architecture and distributed web services and all of this, where, there's sort of like one side of things that parses the data and does some checks and everything passes and looks good there. And then it goes forwarded on to, a backend service. And then that services parses it differently and formats it differently. And then it's like, oh, these are actually the values. And this would be a perfect case if this was split out into two different web applications where, you'd probably see and this is sort of the idea here, is this function parses it one way, says, oh, that first path name wasn't good. Let me check the query string. Okay, that's what I'm going to base it on. And then imagine if it was passing those values onto a service in the backend that was like, oh, no, I don't even look at query strings. I only look at path names and I format them differently. you'd for sure have an issue. So anyways, I've seen this before. If it isn't obvious, and I know you have, I'm sure.
Well, and that's what I'm looking at right now is, okay, it looks like organization ID can be part of the cipher model, the collection model. So whenever we're taking data in as any of these models, we could be looking up org ID based on that. And that's where this confusion could start to happen. So even though, like, if we're using the auth-rs here, that org, whatever, the org header, if it hits that at all, we could potentially drop path parameters in there, and have issues, right? We're gonna have to play with it, right? I think on the posts, that's where it's going to get interesting, as we're posting data up there, because organization find by UUID, but it is pulling the org ID from above, looking for admin headers in that case. So I'm starting to look for, okay, admin headers. Again, this is why we enumerated out all those authorization functions, right? Because it becomes super interesting. We need to know what each of those actually does as we're stepping through here, so we can start to identify those patterns and anti-patterns to see if those vulnerabilities exist. But and talk about rabbit holes, right? Like, we keep trying to step back, but
we're reining it back in. But there are like, when you're looking at authorization decorators, and you're kind of trying to figure it out. That's kind of what happened, is you were looking at some endpoints that were, correct me if I'm wrong, they were somewhat authentication related, or you were just kind of building and coupling that with the actual where I'm at, which is actually looking at each of these authorization decorators and concretely listing out what they're doing and what they're using to authorize people by. So it's a good mashup of sort of like, oh, wait, this is odd. How is that actually being? And, you had the question of IDOR, and but I'm going back to like looking at client IP now and just trying to figure out, how does that actually, let me make sure I actually finish with org headers. But after I finish org headers, I can look at client IP and headers and client IP. Yeah, so client IP is what I have left after this from org, and then I'll probably call it.
I mean, I think we've done enough for tonight, so we can definitely store the notes out, and then we can strategize for the next After Dark episode.
Yes,
which will be in the near future. I mean, there's stuff in here that hasn't passed the sniff test, definitely, but I'm not confident that we found anything super interesting yet, at least from a vulnerability perspective. We've learned a lot about Rocket and Rust, but we haven't necessarily stumbled on anything that I would be taking to the development team yet. So.
No. Though I think we're getting close to that. I think now that we're starting to unravel some weirdness, oddities, edge casey things. Certainly each framework has its own, what we call framework nuances, and always there's something in routes. It could be method interchange. It could be improperly, like with app.use or route.use or whatever with Node Express, however you've defined it. Or you can apply an authorization decorator to multiple routes, but you can do it with regex, and sometimes that can be flawed. And in this case, I think our flaws are rank and where our authorization functions take into account potentially different parameters takes parameters from different parts of the HTTP request as perhaps our defined routes do. And that's pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, they are definitely, like, in organizations, there's a couple places where we're taking data in that has organization IDs in there. in the query parameters. So there's going to be a lot to dig through, right? There's going to be a lot to trace, source to sync. And, before we do the next After Dark episode on this, we probably want to level set a little bit on where we want to take it, pull out some routes, pull out some checklists, well, at least like overarching checklists. I do think it'd be interesting to talk through what it is that we're adding to the checklist and why we're adding to it before we actually jump into something like authentication, right? I know I have a tendency to focus on like authentication, like, user registration, the, login flows, registration flows, forgot password, like invite flows. But why we're actually adding those to the list and what we're dropping out, removing from the list from a prioritization perspective and why. I think that'd be a good place for us to start next time.
I also wanted to note something here. There might be something. So as I was looking at the client IP, it's kind of just like seeing if you like determining what your request IP is. However, what I did notice is that it only does that if it's configured to do that. And so I'm wondering from a logging and auditing perspective, and I'm making a note here about it. I already did actually, but I'm making a note here, just kind of saying like, hey, if for some reason that IP does need to be collected for auditing purposes, and this is how it's doing it, then like be aware that if that config's turned off, we're gonna have some problems. So
yeah, sure.
Or if it defaults to false, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it's configured to false. Okay, cool, man. Well, do you think that's pretty much a wrap for tonight?
Yeah, I think so, right? Like, I appreciate the people that have been sticking with us, right? Larry, there's others there, Eli, whoever else, right? Like Aaron, and I know we've got a few watchers, right? But we'll leave this one up. It's a good walkthrough of approaching something, right? You've seen us distill down the data or the actual code base from an information gathering perspective. We've dug a little bit into the developer documentation for Rocket, started to break down authorization functions, routes, interesting places, talked about some risks, right? This is very true to form. In just a couple of hours, we got a really good idea of where we want to go, right? Right. The higher priority routes are starting to bubble up, and spidey senses are going off. So it's time to just keep at it. But again, we've gone for a couple of hours. It's the end of the day. Ken and I are probably both a little fried because work's been busy, I think, for both of us. So, yeah.
But thank you to everybody. Appreciate those supporting and supporting through watching, and and conversation.
Yep, exactly. And join us in Slack if you can. I did post that in the show notes. Or in the comments there. And it's also on absoluteappsec.com. And if you have more questions, join us in our Slack chat and ask away. We're definitely there every day. So, all right. Well, that has been another episode of Absolute AppSec After Dark. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.